The first explosion shattered the silence of the coastal jungle just before dawn. It wasn't gunfire or thunder. It was too controlled, too deliberate. The blast came from the western perimeter of the Hunters Bay military storage compound, where three former servicemen, each with scars that were never quite erased, were making their move. It was July 9th, 1984, 4:23 a.m. The air was thick with salt and humidity, and the scent of diesel mixed with burning metal. Inside the compound, alarms began to wail, red lights cutting through the haze. The men had 20 minutes. That's what their plan allowed. They called themselves the unit, though their days of uniform and command were long gone. The leader, Thomas Kane, was a former Marine engineer, calm under pressure, with eyes that had seen too much and cared too little anymore. Beside him was Aaron Holt, demolition specialist, steady hands, methodical mind, haunted by debts he could never pay. The third was Micah Doyle, younger, unpredictable, the kind of man who grinned during firefights. They'd met again 2 years earlier at a veterans bar in Baton Rouge. The war had left them disillusioned and broke. But the rumor of the Hunters Bay Vault, a forgotten government storage filled with unregistered cash reserves meant for emergency operations, gave them something dangerous. Purpose. 3.2 million, Micah had whispered that night. And not a soul guarding it except paper pushers. The job was clean at first. Aaron's explosives took out the secondary gate. Thomas cut the power. Micah slipped into the communication shack, looping the internal surveillance feed to buy them precious time. Inside the vault, the air was cold and metallic. Bundles of cash stacked in steel crates marked Relief Operations 1979. Thomas filled 3 duffel bags while Aaron kept time. 15 minutes in, everything was smooth until they heard the click of a weapon behind them. A young guard, barely 20, trembling with an M16 pointed at their backs. "Don't move," he shouted. Micah turned first. There was no hesitation. One shot, a silence flash, and the boy dropped. Aaron froze. Thomas's jaw tightened. "You didn't have to." He was about to call it in. Micah snapped. "We don't have time for guilt." The air turned heavy. The line between necessity and horror blurred. They finished loading the bags and left through the maintenance tunnel, emerging into the dawn mist behind the docks. Waiting, there was an old military patrol boat, rusted but seaworthy. Thomas had secured it months ago through a contact who owed him favors. The plan was simple. Follow the coast south, reach the old logging inlet, and cross into international waters before sunrise. By 5:12 a.m., they were gone, leaving behind a burning compound, a dead soldier, and a country about to wake to scandal. Archive. Radio dispatch log, September 7th, 1984. Code red. Hunters Bay compromised. Unknown assailants. Suspected internal breach. All coastal patrol units converge Grid 7. For the first few hours, it seemed they had made it. The water was calm, and the rising sun painted the horizon in dull gold. The boat's engine rattled, echoing like a heartbeat beneath the waves. Thomas kept the wheel steady. Aaron sat at the stern, staring into the sea. Micah counted the stacks of money again and again, his laughter grating against the sound of the motor. "We actually did it," he said. 3 million, and they'll never find us." Thomas didn't answer. He was watching the radar screen, old, flickering, noticing a faint signal that shouldn't have been there. "Micah," he said quietly, "you turned off the tracker?" Micah deep breathed. "I cut every signal from the dock." "Don't worry." But Thomas wasn't asking about the dock. He was staring at a tiny blinking dot that followed their exact course. "There's something transmitting from the hold." They went below deck, searching through the duffel bags, the gear, the old marine crates. Inside one of the money bags, beneath the third layer of bills, was a small device, a government-issued tracking beacon, the kind used for logistics. "How the hell?" Aaron started. Micah's grin faltered. I thought it was a locator, just for our extraction plan." "You planted this?" Thomas's voice dropped to a low growl. "You put a beacon on our score?" Micah raised his hands. "Relax. It's dead frequency, just in case something went wrong. Backup plan." "You mean your plan?" Aaron snapped. The argument exploded. Voices rose, tempers flared. Thomas grabbed Micah by the collar. "You sold us out. No, Mika hissed. I sold them out. I had a buyer. We don't need to split 3 ways. Thomas shoved him hard, but before he could strike, the sky above them roared. A military helicopter, low and fast, approached from the east. They found us. Aaron shouted. Cut the lights. The boat plunged into chaos. Bullets raked the deck. With splintered, metal screamed. Thomas pushed the throttle, steering toward the mangroves. Smoke filled the air. Mika fired back with an old rifle, shouting curses at the sky. Then came the second explosion, the one that ripped through the hull and sent fire across the deck. Water poured in. The boat twisted, snapped, and went down fast. The last thing Thomas saw before blacking out was the beam of the helicopter fading into the jungle mist. Hours later, the coast was silent again. The authorities recovered debris, but no bodies. The official report called it an intercepted robbery gone wrong, listing all 3 men as presumed deceased. Archive. Incident report. Hunters Bay case 84-27. Recovered assets. None. Total loss. $3.2 million USD. Subjects believed drowned. No remains recovered. Search discontinued. But that was far from the end. 2 days later, 30 miles south of the wreck site, a fisherman named Luis Navarro found a soaked duffel bag tangled in his nets. Inside, cash, military-grade ammunition, and a blood-stained patch with the name Kane. Navarro turned it over to local police. Within a week, he disappeared. His boat was found adrift, motors still running. No sign of struggle, no body, just his hat, floating near the stern. Rumors spread fast across the coastal villages. Some said the soldiers were still alive, hiding in the jungle. Others claimed the government itself had buried the story. After all, how could a classified facility exist without record? In September 1984, a journalist named Julia Hart began investigating. Her report for the Continental Tribune included leaked military memos suggesting an internal cover-up. One memo, dated July 10th, mentioned assets compromised and retrieval operation classified under D-17. Julia's editor killed the story before publication. She quit the paper and vanished from the public eye. 10 years later, that same memo surfaced in a private collection of declassified documents. It bore one additional handwritten note, survivors confirmed. South Ridge sighting. Case remains active. Archive audio transcript. Unverified tape. 1984. Thomas. Aaron, listen to me. We're not dead yet. Aaron, the boat's gone. Half the money's gone. Thomas, we go inland. There's an outpost. They'll be looking for us near the coast. We move at dusk. Unclear, third voice. Possibly Mika. You'll never get out. They'll hunt you forever. The tape ends with the sound of waves and footsteps fading into the jungle. For years, Hunters Bay became a ghost name among veterans, a whisper about a job that never officially existed. The government denied everything. The press forgot. But in 1994, when the rainforest fires reached the southern ridge, firefighters stumbled upon something buried beneath the roots of an old saber tree. A rusted ammunition box containing cash, faded ID tags, and a waterlogged photograph of 3 men aboard a small boat. One man's face was circled in red ink. The caption on the back read, "He made it. The money, though degraded, was real." So were the dog tags. The FBI reopened the file. The new agent in charge, David Mercer, had grown up near Hunters Bay. He'd heard the stories as a boy. Now, staring at the photograph under fluorescent light, he saw the truth hiding in plain sight. Mika Doyle had betrayed them, but someone had lived to tell it. Somewhere out there, deep in the jungle, part of the 3.2 million still waited to be found. But what Mercer didn't know yet, what no one knew, was that the first clue wasn't buried under the ground. It was floating in the tide. 2 weeks after the discovery, another fisherman reported finding an old, sealed glass bottle washed ashore. Inside was a single slip of paper with faded ink. It read, "South Ridge, midnight. Only 2 made it. If you want to know who survived, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from." The bottle was found on the morning tide, rolling gently against the mangrove roots like it had been waiting for someone to notice. Inside, the note's handwriting was almost erased by salt, but the words were still visible under a magnifying lamp. South Ridge, midnight. Only two made it. That single phrase reignited the Hunters Bay investigation after nearly 10 years of silence. Special Agent David Mercer reopened the case file in 1994 under code name Project Riptide. He'd grown up hearing about the robbery, the lost $3.2 million, and the burned patrol boat, but now he was the one holding evidence that suggested survival. The forensic lab dated the paper to the mid-1980s, confirming it had spent years in humid storage before exposure to seawater. The ink, a rare military-grade typewriter ribbon dye, matched samples from the Hunters Bay administration offices. Whoever wrote, it had once worked within the system they robbed. Mercer flew to the coast within 48 hours. Hunters Bay hadn't changed much. The same decaying docks, the same heat that wrapped around you like a fever. Locals still whispered about the three soldiers who stole the government's ghost money. When Mercer asked about the ridge, fishermen looked away. Bad place, one said. Fire took it. Then the soldiers came back. The South Ridge had burned during the forest fires that year, revealing a patch of blackened soil where the jungle once stood thick. Mercer's team set up a perimeter and began digging. Within 2 days, they uncovered fragments of rusted metal, a torn section of boat hull, and something stranger, a human skull with a dog tag fused to the jawbone. The name read Holt, Aaron J. That meant Thomas Kane or Mika Doyle had been the writer of the message. Mercer's gut said it was Kane. Reports described him as the strategist, the man who planned every move. But something didn't fit. Why send a message after 10 years? Why surface now? That night, rain fell hard over the camp. Mercer couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the recovered radio logs from 1984, the static, the faint voices arguing over the beacon, the sound of chaos before the line cut. Then he heard something new. One technician had slowed the tape and filtered the noise. Buried under the final seconds was a voice, soft, almost prayer-like. If anyone finds this, tell them he didn't die for greed. Mercer froze. The voice was older than the others. He believed it was Kane. At dawn, a new discovery confirmed it. 50 yards from where Holt's remains were found, searchers uncovered a small waterproof container. Inside was a cassette tape wrapped in plastic and an army patch. The label on the tape said July 12, 1984, last log. The recorder word when played, old but intact. Kane's voice came through, strained, weak, but clear. If this tape survives, it means I didn't. The crash took us inland. Aaron's leg's gone. Mika's alive, but different. He had the beacon all along. Said the buyer promised him freedom. They're coming for us. If you're hearing this, we were never thieves. We were cleanup. The money wasn't ours. It was theirs. Mercer paused the tape, staring at the waveform on the monitor. Theirs meant something bigger. He sent the tape to headquarters for forensic enhancement. 2 words repeated in the background. Operation D-17. That same code had appeared in Julia Hart's suppressed memo a decade earlier. Mercer reached out to her, now living in isolation under another name. She agreed to meet him in a small diner outside Miami. Her hair was gray. Her hands still shook when she lit a cigarette. They told me to forget Hunters Bay, she said. Said it was a classified relief fund. In reality, it was cash for black ops, money that never officially existed. Mercer asked about the 3 soldiers. She nodded slowly. They were couriers, not criminals. They were transporting the money out when someone flipped the operation. Someone wanted it to look like theft. Mercer realized the betrayal hadn't started on the boat. It started before the job even began. Mika Doyle was likely an informant. Kane and Holt were scapegoats. The government couldn't admit it lost millions of illegal funds, so it buried the story. Archive, internal memorandum, D-17/confidential, asset transfer failed. Remaining subjects expendable. Containment prioritized over recovery. The words made Mercer's stomach turn. That night, he drove back to the South Ridge and sat alone near the excavation pit. Crickets hummed. The jungle felt alive again. He played the rest of Kane's tape. Aaron didn't make it through the night. Mika ran at dawn. I followed the river north until the gunfire stopped. If anyone's left, they'll find the truth here. South Ridge, midnight. Only two made it. Then silence, except for the sound of water and a distant explosion. Mercer looked out into the darkness and whispered, "You try to tell us." The investigation shifted inland. Satellite scans revealed the remnants of an old structure buried under vegetation near the ridge, possibly a bunker. When they cleared it, they found crates marked with military serials and another corpse, badly decomposed, clutching a sidearm. Dental records confirmed it was Micah Doyle. Inside his jacket was a torn photograph showing three men laughing beside a truck. And on the back, scrawled words, "It was never supposed to end like this." The forensic team also recovered partial bills, burned but traceable to the stolen currency series. That meant at least some of the 3.2 million had been here. Mercer's theory hardened. Micah double-crossed the team, triggered the beacon to ensure they'd be intercepted, and then fled inland with part of the money. But the intercept went wrong. The helicopter attack destroyed the boat, and the survivors turned on each other. Yet the question remained, if both Holt and Doyle were dead, who had written the note in the bottle years later? Mercer's assistant, Agent Rowe, proposed a simple but chilling idea. Someone else survived. The next clue came unexpectedly. A retired Coast Guard mechanic contacted the Bureau claiming he once repaired a patrol craft that returned from Hunter's Bay, missing half its serials. He mentioned an unregistered passenger found adrift 2 weeks after the incident. A man suffering burns, claiming to be a fisherman. No records, no name. Mercer tracked down the mechanic's logbook. The man's initials were TK. Thomas Kane had lived. In November 1994, an anonymous tip led Mercer to a small settlement upriver. Locals said a foreigner had lived there for years, quiet, limping, paid for everything in old U.S. bills. They called him the captain. When Mercer arrived, the cabin was empty. A kettle still warm, paper scattered. On the table lay a half-finished letter addressed to Julia. It read, "They never stopped watching. Tell Mercer the Ridge still hides what they fear most. I kept one tape safe. If they find me, the truth dies again." Footprints led into the forest but stopped near a collapsed bridge. Downstream, divers found a body days later. It had been dead less than a week. Dental matches confirmed Thomas Kane. He had survived 10 years, only to die within reach of freedom. Among his belongings was a weatherproof case containing a small cassette recorder and a metal tag engraved with coordinates. The final tape began with the sound of heavy rain. "I'm tired," Kane's voice rasped. "The world forgot us, but I can't. We weren't thieves. We were carriers. D-17 was meant to disappear, not us. The money bought silence, assassinations, the kind of operations no flag claims. They sent us to erase it, then erased us." His breathing grew slower. "If anyone listens, dig where the light doesn't reach." The tape ended with thunder. Mercer's team followed the coordinates to a limestone cave system 2 miles east of the ridge. Deep inside, half submerged in stagnant water, they found 6 metal containers. Inside each were decaying stacks of cash and envelopes stamped "Restricted Payload, D-17. The total, roughly $2.7 million. The missing $500,000 was gone forever. But that wasn't all they found. At the back of the cavern, half buried in mud, was an ammunition box containing old photos, typed memos, and a sealed envelope addressed to whoever seeks the truth. The letter, written in Kane's uneven handwriting, read, "We followed orders. We moved the money because they told us it didn't exist. When they turned on us, we became the evidence. Aaron died because I believed the uniform still meant something. Micah died chasing what he thought was freedom. I stayed alive to make this right. If you find this, don't clear our names. Just remember we were there." Mercer stood in that cave for hours, surrounded by the echoes of history. The government classified the discovery within days, sealing the case again under national security. Officially, Hunter's Bay remained an unsolved robbery. Unofficially, Mercer kept one of the photos, a faded shot of 3 soldiers beside their patrol boat, sunlight on their faces, laughter frozen in time. Years later, when Mercer retired, he left that photograph in a frame on his desk with a handwritten note. They didn't steal the money. They carried the lie. The press eventually got wind of partial details through leaks. Documentaries were made, speculating about hidden funds and conspiracy, but no one ever proved what Operation D-17 truly was. Julia Hart published a final article before her death in 2001, titled The Ghosts of Hunters Bay. It ended with the line, "If truth sinks long enough, it becomes myth, but myths still float." In 2004, two local boys exploring the same river found another bottle trapped among roots. Inside was a military patch and a single photograph. Kane, younger, standing by the sea, looking back at the camera. On the reverse side, 3 words, "We made it." Experts couldn't explain how the photo survived 20 years underwater. Some said it was a hoax. Others believed it was Kane's last message to the world, sent long before he died, knowing the tide would eventually bring it home. Today, the story of the Hunters Bay heist is taught at the Academy as an example of moral ambiguity in covert operations. The files remained sealed, but the recovered money was quietly funneled into veteran relief programs, a quiet redemption for a tragedy the public never knew. And somewhere along the mangrove coast, old fishermen still claim that on certain foggy mornings when the tide rolls in, they hear a faint mechanical click, like a recorder starting, followed by a man's voice whispering through the wind, "We were never thieves." What do you think? Was justice ever really served, or was the truth buried with them? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.